We're all born with a very, very important tool that helps us understand when we feel safe or not safe, comfortable or uncomfortable, we feel emotional, but very rarely are we ever taught how to utilize this important tool, our body. So today's guest is Ben Dorfman, who is an acupuncturist, Chinese herbalist, and a life coach. And recently he wrote a book called The Highly Intelligent Body that talks a lot about how to understand some of those signals that the body's telling us that we may have been taught to ignore or never taught properly how to understand. So Ben has taken the opportunity to write this beautiful book to teach us how to understand some of those signals as they start to happen, how to ask questions and be a witness to some of those answers that come up and as they come up, because every body is different. And a lot of times these signals and these things we figure out about our bodies are different for each human. So there's a very big path with that whole concept of learning how to listen to your own personal body. So through today's conversation, we're going to talk about Ben's book, The Highly Intelligent Body, and also talk about his journey through a lot of what he's had to work through to get to a point where he feels comfortable working with other humans and becoming a practitioner in the healing arts. I love Ben's mindset, and a lot of the topics we talk about we're very, very in line with. Emotional bodies, how to develop and work with your intuition, body awareness. I mean, these are all things that we are both very passionate about. And towards the end of the conversation, Ben talks about opening up a spiritual school where he would integrate a lot of the understandings that he's finding out into a practice that we can start to teach our humans from a young age how to utilize this beautiful, beautiful tool that we're all built and born with. So hope you get something out of the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. But first, a message from our sponsor. Our healing journey can be difficult and might feel lonely at times. That's why I love sound baths. When we can get together in a community, we intrinsically support and feel supported by others. And that combined energy can help us go deeper into our own healing journeys. And all you have to do is just lay there for 1 hour and listen to beautiful healing sounds. I'm a sound healing practitioner, and I hold sound baths on a regular basis in the greater Seattle area. You can find my next sound baths on my website at adamrealhealing.com. That's Adam, A-D-A-M, Real, R-I-E-H-L, Healing, H-E-A-L-I-N-G.com. adamrealhealing.com. Your healing is worth your time. And now an uninterrupted podcast with Ben Dorfman. All right, welcome back to the show. Today I'm talking to Ben Dorfman. Ben is an acupuncturist, Chinese herbalist, and life coach, practicing in the greater Seattle area, more Everett, right?
Actually, I'm South Seattle.
South Seattle,
Yeah.
there you go, right on. So I was introduced to Ben through social media, and Ben had written this amazing book called The Highly Intelligent Body, and that's what kind of turned me on to his work. And then I started to get deeper into his work, love the book, which is what we're going to talk about today. But the work that you do as an acupuncturist, I can only imagine is amazing because of all the content that I've seen you put up there. And one of the things that you said in our pre-interview that I really loved is that you're a spiritual healer masquerading as an acupuncturist.
That's true.
I fucking love that. That's great. So Ben, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate you sitting down and talking with me.
Yeah, man. Thank you. This is an awesome opportunity, and I just love all the topics we're going to get into. So I'm excited. Man. Yeah.
Well, so you, and I find this true for a lot of people in whatever healing modality we find ourselves in. Typically, we conquer something pretty demonic within ourselves to find the understanding of self, to then find the strength to help others.
Yep.
And if I'm not mistaken, that's not really wrong with you also. You had some demons that you conquered and got on the other side of. And so was that like the impetus to get you into like that path that you're in now? Was that victory of like that breath of like, I've made it, I've understood something?
Yeah. I mean, it's been an interesting journey, you're talking about like the healer's journey, like the wounded healer, it's like we kind of work through our own wounds, and those are like our teachers, and it gives us the tools to offer to other people. Right. And like, for me, it was like a mixture of like, pretty crippling depression for like a long time. And my depression was like in the form of like, not just like a super weighted heaviness on my body at all times, but also my inner dialogue, my mind was just so violent and nasty towards myself. And I just didn't know what to do with that, and I never had a conversation when I was younger with anyone who could just help me understand, like, why is this voice in my head? You know, it's like, I feel like that should be like a very beginner conversation. Like, you know, at some point, you know, when you get a certain age, you start hearing voices in your head, you know, they're thoughts, you know, but like, I feel like we should be warned, you know, in some way.
100%.
But I also mixed with that depression and trying to figure out what was going on. I just had this like spiritual yearning that just ached really heavy, like in my heart. And it, you know, always felt like a heart memory of like knowing there's a spiritual home that I had come from, this place of, you know, love and light and, you know, consciousness and just this unconditional loving space. But I couldn't figure out where it went. It was like I was here and I just felt so abandoned and so alone, but I remembered it, you know, but I had no one to talk to about that either.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like this double whammy of like totally being lost and miserable, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does. It does. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Charles Eisenstein.
I know. Yeah.
He's kind of more of a prominent speaker, is kind of coming up in the world of like just spiritual speaking and just, you know, looking at the world in different ways. And he's written a bunch of books, but one of the more recent books he's written was The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful book. And at the very end, he actually writes, he has a short story in there. I'll paraphrase it, but basically it's about a shamanic planet 1,000,000 years in advance of what Earth is. And within that planet, they understand that Earth is in peril, in a place that they were at about 1,000,000 years ago. And so they know that they can help. But the thing is they can send people down there, but once you get to Earth, you forget everything about where you've come from.
Right.
But you have this yearning.
Right.
This yearning that you know this isn't right, but you know there's a community out there for you, and you know there's something bigger, but you don't know.
Right.
But you know, right?
Right.
And so and it's the journey of finding the community and remembering, like putting the members back together, right?
Right.
And I think there's a beauty in that because, like for me personally, when I finally got into sound healing, which is one of my biggest modalities now, it felt like this passion that was reawakened in me.
Yeah.
But it was like it was there before. So it's like something that lineagely or ancestrally, it's been following me, and it's been my job to find it in each one of these lives.
Right.
And when you do, it's like it's those things that you're just immediately passionate about.
Totally. It makes me think of like, you know, I also believe like our soul, you know, has very particular talents, you know, and so like that's like a sound healer that's a great example of that, right? Where you're like, your soul's like, yes, I finally found my tool, you know, and like, it just like, there's a literal vibration about that one, you know, but like, it's like, it really, you come alive, you become yourself again, you know?
Yep.
Another book, I don't know if you read it, it's like a book about soul contracts. I think the author is Robert Schwartz. It's like your soul's gift or something like that.
Okay.
But his version of kind of what you were saying, you know, with that other guy is like, you know, we consciously create our path and our journey before we come down with our soul group. Yeah. And we have like key things we're trying to accomplish. But it's the same kind of rules apply. We know going in that we'll be physical, so we'll be limited in kind of our full, you know, range of, you know, endless knowledge and wisdom and who we truly are, right? But also we're going to forget where we come from because we have to forget. Otherwise, we can't go through suffering and be transformed. You know, it's like, so, you know, that one's an interesting version because I like the conscious choosing and planning of it all too, you know.
I'm not familiar with that author, but that version of reincarnation is one that I love also, and I didn't know it came from him, or maybe it was written about through him.
I mean, you know, it's been there forever, you know. It's like, yeah.
But what's really helped me with that version is, and it took me a while. It's taken me a long time to get this understanding for my personal self. Is that when I start to go through like what I would consider shit in life, right? Bad parts or like the learning experiences that I now understand are those, but those downtrodden where you don't feel confident, whatever it is. There's a comfort that I know because there was a very, very conscious version of myself that intentionally put this in front of me, knowing that I would figure it out.
Totally.
And there's a confidence that comes from that of like, man, if I knew that this version of me was going to be like this hard up, there's got to be a reason why.
Yeah.
You know, and it just gives me a little bit of comfort of like, okay, so now, get over your emotions, right? Understand that they're there. You've heard the messages, the emotions say you're not ignoring them, which I've done a lot of.
Yep.
but you can start to like, okay, now I'm going to be the witness, right? And you
Yeah.
start to like come up into that understanding, that consciousness, and say, okay, so you're in some shit, maybe you're in trouble, maybe you're whatever it is. What is your lesson, and how do you maneuver through this in the way that you feel honored?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of ways we can shortchange that shit and just like, oh fuck it, I'm gonna revert back to old Adam because
Right.
old Adam has the pattern figured out to deal with this situation.
Totally. But also, to give us some help along the way as well. Right? This is kind of where my book comes in. It's like we have this body, right? And the body, if we were taught to listen to it and to commune with it, the body is this fantastic compass that like is totally aligned to our path, and it's designed as like a magnet to keep us on path, right? And all the emotions and the things that we feel, those are all messages that we're being told, like these things are happening to us, or we need to go in this direction, or maybe we have certain cravings and longings, like I've always craved to be a healer, or like whatever may be there, right? That's also like the body being like, know your path, right? And so like we're not fully abandoned. We have this thing that we take with us that's like our best tool, right?
Yeah.
Although we're taught to like fight against it, which is a sad thing, but like it's here to really help us. But also, in certain beliefs, and this is kind of like I've been training with Shar Sundas, who, is a Lakota shamanic trainer. And, in that belief system and a lot of other, indigenous beliefs, like we have these soul allies, these spirit allies who are here with us. They are part of the invisible world, but we're also not taught to interact with them and bring them in, right? But like if we do that, like we have a huge helping force that's here that we can utilize, but we don't get any of that. We're just taught to be alone, essentially, which is really
Totally.
yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Char's name. My spiritual mentor also trained under Char.
Oh yeah.
I've not met her, but
Yeah.
I've heard amazing things about this person.
She's awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I agree, 100% with what you just said. Like I grew up ignoring religion.
Yeah.
We had Catholicism in our house, and it didn't sit right. My parents never forced it, so it was like, okay, well, we'll figure it out when we get older.
Yeah.
And I just kind of abandoned it, like all spirituality, all forms of religion, all that shit, until I found meditation, and then kind of leaned into that. But once the spiritual family, I call it my spiritual family now, idea kind of came into the head, and that idea that like your relatives, your ancestors, your animals, like all these things around you are constantly there to support you. Like they're literally cheering you on and holding space for you.
Yeah.
It was jarring at first,
Sure.
but it's such a comforting feeling.
Oh yeah.
And like you said in your book, about your book, is like when we can start to listen to our bodies and like quiet ourselves down and realize that this is part of us and not just this meat suit that just gets us from here to there.
Right.
I feel those beings within my body,
Yeah.
like and they, like a yes or a no. Like I know how that feels, what they're telling me or what they're guiding me towards.
Totally.
But it's like we'll get to this down the road, but like we're never taught this shit. At least in the Western culture, we're not taught this shit. We have to figure this out on our own, even if at all.
It's crazy. I mean, well, it's funny we were talking about podcasts earlier, but like my first podcast was called like The Guide to the Human Experience, because like it was like, yeah, we should get a fucking manual to this shit, It's like, I mean, obviously we just need conscious adults around us who could be like, okay, this is what to expect, and let's bring you through some initiation so you can build strength and courage and like know that you have what it takes to work through it, But like, yeah, we're just essentially just thrown in the deep end alone without like a life vest or nothing. And it's like, hope you survive, and like, and a lot of people don't, that's,
They don't,
that's why we're kind of in this crisis now, at least, in our Western culture here. It's like, it's so many people are suffering for so many reasons. It's just totally, it's a mess. And like, part of how I reason that, not just the obvious stuff like racism and inequality and all that stuff, but it's also like there's a spiritual crisis here,
Right.
and we need more spiritual healing and teaching coming through to help people.
Yeah. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I loved your book, is that it gives another outlet for that. And it has spiritual overtones to it, but it's not like it's not forcing it on you, right?
Yeah.
It's more of like, this is the body we're built with. This is how this has worked for me. And the emotional stuff, there's so many layers of what you go into, that it's almost like a roadmap, right? To give you an understanding of like not what to expect, but because every body is going to respond differently.
Right.
And that's some of the maybe frustrating thing for a lot of us, but it's also some of the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Once you can like embrace that idea, because you get to figure you out.
Yeah.
Like your yes and your no is going to be different than my yes and my no. You know,
Yeah.
when I get anxious, it's going to resonate differently in my body. I might feel it in my chest. I might feel it in my abdomen, you know,
Yeah.
but knowing where I feel it, then I can start to understand how to downregulate that nervous system to get everything back into normal. Right.
Totally. I mean, I was really surprised. So like, fast forward like 2.5 decades later, like into my later 20s, still going through so much depression, but I finally, found this therapist who, I don't know if she consciously did this or not, but like she really was like this intimacy therapist who helped me come out of my really violent mind and like see how my thoughts are really attached to an emotional root. And so she'd bring me into my body, into my emotions, and then she'd help me sit there and like listen, essentially, right? But she's
Wow.
a typical therapist. I mean, I didn't know this was happening when I first saw her, but then, a year into like a weekly therapy session with her, I realized very quickly, like, oh my God, like I'm actually starting to really love my depression, which may sound weird, right? But it started to hit me like my depression and really my body were this like incredibly wise force that was trying to get me to understand something very deep, and I couldn't see it. I
Right.
needed someone to hold that space for me, in a calm, conscious, non-judgmental way, so I could be calm with myself. It was
Yeah.
like a mirroring effect. You know what I mean? But when I started to see that, I realized, oh shit, like here I was fighting against this pain the whole time, and it wasn't trying to harm me, it was trying to guide me, and once that hit, I was like, oh my God, like the body is so spiritual.
Wow.
And like, there's, I mean, and to me, that the book is, or my work in my practice as like a coach, really, I do a lot of emotional healing work one-on-one, and like it's really about helping people integrate like the spiritual and the emotional together. It's like, too often the spiritual community, we separate it. We say, oh, we're here on earth and the spiritual world is up over there somewhere, right? So it's like separate.
Right.
And it's bullshit. It's a total illusion, right? And like being here in physical form is so sacred, so spiritual, and we just have no idea. I mean, the pain is distracting, and like, yes, there's like so much suffering and trauma currently. So it's like very distracting, you know what I mean? But
Right.
like
Yeah.
when we can begin to heal and go on that journey, we can really awaken to like, oh my God, like there's something so powerful here, but also like there's no separation between the spiritual world and us. So like we can build these relationships in a totally different way, and they can
Yeah.
be very helpful,
I love that. There's, what you're saying about emotions too. We're so much in a later type culture where we try to say we'll deal with stuff later, emotions, feelings, all that stuff. And to what you're saying, those things are just messages, right?
Yeah.
You have the discernment whether or not to step into what fear is telling you.
Yeah.
But if you don't hear what fear tells you, fear is just going to get louder and
Yeah.
get more aggressive. Just like your kid, right? You probably, do you have kids?
I have 2 kids. Yeah.
Right. So sometimes it's like dad, 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 dad,
Yeah.
dad, dad. And you're just like, what the fuck, leave me the fuck alone. And all of a sudden you're just like, what do you want? And they're like, hi, and then just run off, right?
Yeah.
Our emotions are very similar to that. They have a message, like anxiety, depression, fear, all these things. Joy has messages.
Yep.
I listened to Brene Brown talk recently, and she was talking about how we have an issue as a humanity stepping into any emotion fully.
Yeah.
Even joy.
Yeah.
We're waiting for the other shoe to drop when joy hits, right? So we
Right.
can't fully embrace joy. We can't fully embrace the happiness that brings because we're still just like cringing, waiting.
Totally.
So having the intelligence to hear, again, you're discerning, right?
Yeah.
You can step into it or not,
Yep.
but just to hear it, right? To hear that fucking message and then figure out what you want to do with it. I think that would help so much, and it's just a little thing to do, but we're so afraid of what that message might be
Yeah.
and how we might have to act on it that we don't even want to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, my intention in writing the book was to just write about universal principles, and like the ones in the book are like, I think, going to be applicable to anyone, right?
Yeah.
And I've been in practice 12 years now, and I've done like just like, thousands of hours of coaching and helping people emotionally heal. And so I've tested all these things out on everyone,
Yeah.
and they all apply, right? And so like one of the tenets that's in the book that you're talking about, right, is like, in my world, is like the body is incredibly trustworthy, but it's also incredibly intelligent, and it does not give you feelings or thoughts for no reason. It's always very specific purpose. And it's never to fuck your life up. It's always to be like, hey, like you need to pay attention to this thing, right? And we just don't learn to trust the body in that way. We are trained to think of the body as our enemy and as this kind of inconvenience that's in our way, right? Because the body is limited and it deteriorates and it breaks down, right? So if you want to like always be the young guy running 20 miles a day, like you're never going to sustain that, right? And like, and we get so upset about that. We try to do our surgeries and we try to do this and we're trying to hold on, and then we're like, the body, it's like, fuck the body, it's like, it's just so backwards, And so, it's a lot of how I hold space for people. People come in with depression and trauma and anxiety. And the first conversation we tend to start having when they're there is like, well, what happens if like the body wasn't trying to harm you? What happens if it was like trying to show you something? How would you look at what's happening or step towards it in a different way?
Yeah.
And people really calm down, right? And they become more open, and then you find some curiosity, like, oh shit, like there's some fucking stuff here that's really important, it turns out, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's like a universal principle, this trustworthiness and this wisdom that like we should be talking about more,
Yes. When you started working with bodies in acupuncture, was that your first modality to kind of step towards? So when did like these light bulbs start going off with you as like, I'm seeing a lot of similarities with this, or this is like a similar kind of dialogue I hear, when did those lights start going off for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I went to Bastyr, and they have they're well known for acupuncture training. It's a master's program, and like I'd say a couple of things happened. One, I was very disappointed when I got there because I thought, oh man, I'm learning acupuncture. This is like an energy medicine, right? I'm going to like a spiritual school,
Totally, yeah.
And then I got there, it was like totally Western. I was like, fuck, this sucks. Where's the spirituality? You know what I mean? So I was like really disappointed. And then number two, there was no emotion behind the treatments. It was like, oh, this point's for low back pain. Oh, this point's for this point's for that. And yes, there is like other versions of acupuncture, like 5 elements, that does focus on emotions. But the suffering I was going through, I was really hoping that there'd be more emotional depth to the approach of acupuncture, and that wasn't there, right? To the point of like in clinic, we had to wear lab coats as we treated people, which I just thought like was like the worst thing ever,
Wow.
And B, we weren't allowed to hug people. They're like, you're not, and talk to people, like you're not the therapist, like you're not their friend, like you put the needles in, you let them be there, and you leave, right? Wow. I just felt like there was this lack of warmth. There's something missing,
Yeah.
And especially when people got out of pain or they had good responses to the acupuncture, that they'd want to see you specifically because you've helped them. And then they'd tell you all these things about other things that are going on. And like, I'd want to sit there and talk with them. And like, it was like, no, you can't do that. Right. Wow. So I was so annoyed by that. Right. And then number two, as I was going through training, I was also in this book group that called Living in the Present Moment. Wait, is that the right? Practicing being in the present moment. And it was a book group where we communally voted on books, and we'd read the books together out loud every Monday, or just parts of them, at whatever we can get through in a couple of hours, and then we talk about them. It was just an awesome thing, right? And I was having this kind of emotional awakening as I was going through that. And so halfway through training, I was like, I don't want to be an acupuncturist. I want to be a therapist. And I was debating whether to leave school, and I called my mom. My mom's a healer too. She's awesome. And I was like, I want to leave. I want to go to therapy school. And mom's like, stop. Like, you're almost done.
Yeah.
Like, just finish it and like go train to be a coach, and then you can have a platform, and like you're good. It's like that. And so I was like, okay, it's fine. That's what I did, right? And so when I got out, I was just feeling so rebellious. I was like, I don't want this traditional model. I hate it, And so I just combined the two essentially, and like gave people the option to do either coaching and acupuncture back to back. But I also spent so much time talking with people, and while the needles were in, and like it was just, I wanted to integrate it all,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it all started, and then kind of evolved from there. Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear you did that. That's one of the things that I love the most about being in like energy healing and this modality is that you can have interactions with humans as a human being. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this, like you said, lab coat, official. You know, my mom recently lost her bout with cancer, but went through cancer, and that was my first, you know, in a long time dealing with Western medicine on a regular basis. And it was so disheartening to see every doctor that was supposed to be there to save her life stand at least 10 feet from her. Like barely we get in the door, reading their clipboard, looking up, reading clipboard. And it was the nurses and the support staff that would come around and be the loving,
Yeah.
hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling? Can I get you some ice? You know, all this stuff. And no answers from doctors, no bedside manner, if that's even a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And it was so disheartening, but at the same time, it made me love and appreciate what I was doing so much more, and the people like yourself so much more, because you are human beings and you see the human. And there's like, you're already scared as shit in those situations, right?
God.
Something's going sideways. You don't feel good, mentality, whatever it is, physical, whatever. And then you get this cold ass human being in front of you that's supposed to be the one that's helping you. Like, let's put the clipboards away, throw the stethoscopes out, like, give me a fucking hug.
Yeah.
Let's be humans together.
Totally.
Because there's that connection, and that when you feel safe, when you feel loved, when you feel taken care of, like, then you can heal.
Totally.
But when you're always on guard because you don't know what information is going to come, I got to pay another bill and I got a fucking doctor, you know, a prescription I can't even pronounce, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, man, where do we even start with that shit, you know?
Ugh, I'm sorry. That's just.
It was tough.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, it
sorry.
was a
That's
tough
so
one, man.
sad to
Yeah.
go through.
Yeah, but you know, like I said, you know, that there was a beautiful lesson in that,
Yeah.
you know, in that whole experience, both from, you know, from my mom being in the medical system to the transitioning out,
Yeah.
and just you know, everything that went with it. You know, it was a terrifying moment, but it was also a lot of beauty in it. You
Totally.
know? But it was like, and it was funny because I think I read your book like right after she had passed.
Oh, wow.
And it was just reassuring to feel like, to read what you were talking about with emotions and how they hit with the body and how to understand, and just a lot of it was just it was reaffirming, you know,
Good.
that like, okay, you're taking care of yourself, you're not hiding from your grief, you know,
Yeah.
because that's, you know, we tend to hide from those things sometimes.
Totally. You know, it reminds me again of like another universal principle. It's in the book of like, you know, in my opinion, we are highly sensitive beings who need love and intimacy to thrive. Period. You know, and like what's one of the things we're desperately missing right now? Love and intimacy, right?
Yes.
It's like, and so, you know, it can be actually like so viscerally healing when you have these like loving interactions with a healer, or maybe it's like a really loving friend, you know, but
Yeah.
like, it's like, there's something nourishing for like our souls, you know, and like
Yeah.
a lot of people don't get to ever experience that, you know?
Yeah, and there's an intimacy that I think that we can share with every single person that's unique to that person.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like a sexual intimacy or this like romantic intimacy, but you know, for example, like my fiance and I, we've been together for 8 years. We've known each other for almost 20 years. But there are relationships that I have with other humans, men and women, whatever you recognize as, or whatever those friends recognize as, that will fill something within me that Monica can't. And that's
Sure.
not nothing against her, but she's only one person.
Yeah,
So
of
for me
course.
to expect all of me to be fulfilled through one person is kind of selfish, right? And so that idea of opening up and not like not opening the relationship to more partners, but just opening the idea that intimacy that I feel like with this conversation, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's topics that we talk about that I could never talk about with anybody else.
Yeah.
And that creates this like beautiful moment that I could just, you know, throw away as like, that was a cool conversation. Or like later on I can be like, dude, I really got something from that. I feel very charged in this intimate moment that we shared.
Yeah.
And be like, and just feel into the body and feel how that charges us, you know?
Totally. I mean, I tend to define intimacy as like, yeah, quality of connection, essentially, right? And like that's what I hear you talking about, right?
Definitely.
It's like, and like, what is the quality of it? Well, I mean, you have to feel like safe and heard, and you know, have someone who's like open and warm with you. I mean, there's certain qualifications there, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, too often we're just in this like competitive, capitalistic crap, you know, where we're just against each other, and like we miss out on this, you know, magical stuff. And
Yeah.
it's been interesting going through Char's training. I'm in my end of my second year training with her, and it's a 3-year training. And you know, one thing I noticed coming out of the first year is like there's such this communal thing going on. I mean, we had like, I don't know, 30 people in our first year class, and like, for me, the class in some way was kind of slow because there's a lot of like emotional awareness building, and I had done so much work in that area. I was kind of like, what's next kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so I feel like I didn't see it at the time what was happening, but like just the act of seeing these people every week, but also being around like people who are just doing their work and who are spiritual, like to me, that's like so important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's everything to me. And like I realized by like, I don't know, 6 months into that, and we had a few retreats together, or whatever. I was like, oh my God, like there's something happening to me that's healing me with the group. I mean, it was just the group, just being in the group,
Yes.
period. You know what I mean? It wasn't anything crazy magical, or it was just like the community, right?
Yeah.
In the right way, right? It's like,
Right. Yeah.
and it's like I realized, oh man, I've underestimated also like not just intimacy, but how much we need a lot of closeness and a group dynamic, right? Again, to be a healthy version of ourselves,
Yes.
and we're just so isolated. And I mean, COVID, my God, like it's just so stupid, it's like I wish, and people can say, oh, it's a panic time, we didn't know what was happening, da 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 da, right? But
Right.
it's like, well, if we had any consciousness about how humans operated, you'd say like, fucking go isolate for 14 days and like find 10 people to live with, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and do that for a year, and you'd probably come out pretty okay, you know what I mean? But instead, it's like we underestimated connection, and we're like, we don't, we have virtual, it's the same. Of course
Right.
it's not. What the fuck, and it's like, but then people are coming out and they're fucked up, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely. That's been one of the most. I think. And I don't want to be like the fucking sunshine. Everything's got a fucking bright side. All this shit. But like, that we kind of needed to realize how fucked up we were.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the whole world shutting down to that point.
Yeah.
But to your point about community, I've always kind of identified as an introvert.
Yeah.
I've had very extroverted jobs, restaurants, all this stuff. So I've always been on in some kind of way, bartending, managing, and so when I get home, it's like, okay, shut it off, done, right? And so I've
Right.
kind of got this moniker myself. I've identified as that introvert, and until COVID happened, I didn't realize how much I needed community because I was constantly surrounded by it.
Wow.
Because even after I got out of restaurants, I was in yoga. I started teaching yoga before I started doing energy work. And, yoga communities are very warm and inviting. And, we talk about shit after you're done with Shavasana. And, like, all your
Right.
endorphins are rushing and all this stuff. But I took that for granted as just, part of the job.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Had a class, taught a class, talked to people, always meaningful conversations, love the conversations. But after, like, I think it was maybe second week of COVID, I'm like, I need to talk to somebody. Like, holy shit. Like,
Yeah.
and Monica and I love each other, get along great, but like, I need another human being.
Yeah.
And it was a nice, beautiful aha moment for me that, don't label yourself.
Right.
One,
Well,
don't
there's
label
that.
yourself, right?
Right.
But embrace that community in whatever way, because we need it. We feed off that shit.
Totally.
We've been communal beings since, civilization, since the dawn of time, right?
Totally. And this is, one of my favorite things in healing work is like attachment style theory stuff. Are you familiar with attachment theory?
A little bit, but please.
Yeah. I mean, it's just essentially like talks about like the quality of connection that we get when we're kids, or we don't get the quality of connection, like what it does to us, And so, the way I've interpreted attachment theory is like, we are built again as sensitive creatures who need love to thrive, right? And so in theory, what they would call like a secure attachment in attachment theory is like being born to parents, who are warm, who are emotionally available, who are emotionally conscious so they can support you emotionally because you don't know what the fuck's going on, right?
Yeah.
And, someone that would hold you and hug you, and like your presence is wanted there, right? And, there's all these other versions of attachments that are not that, right? And like I come out of anxious attachment with my, family system, which is like, it's like a mother who you can bond with some of the time, but then her own needs trump, and like she, gets inside of herself and needs to have that stuff managed, right? And so then I become the one responsible to try to make her be okay, so I can get what I need. It's just like, I love attachment because it talks so much ultimately about the impact of the connection quality on us as we grow.
Yeah.
And it's so real, right?
Yeah, that makes me think a lot about myself as a parent. When we first had our first kid, I was 23. Having babies. I was very selfish, still very egocentric. Drank a lot. All that fun stuff. And 20 what, almost 20 years later now, I've been doing a lot of work, and I went through a very big phase of life that I was very hard on myself about my relationship with my daughter and the abandonment that I didn't think I was there for and all this stuff. But, it's as much as I feel bad about that hurt, there's part of me that knew that it had to happen for both of us, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to get to that point because I just felt like such a bad human being for a long time, and I attached myself to that moniker, you know. And actually, finally one day, but it was not too long ago, not too long before my mom passed, we were having a conversation about it, and she looked at me, she's like, "You need to get the fuck over it."
Wow.
Just get the fuck over it.
Wow.
Right? You've done your work. This is her work to do now.
Yep.
Like, you've done your work. The situation manifested, right? That's
Yep.
fine. Then we wish it didn't happen, but it happened.
Yep.
Now you've done your work. This is her opportunity for her to do her work. You can't force it.
Yeah.
Like, create the environment for happiness, but you can't force happiness to happen.
Yeah. Totally.
And it's those messages like we don't, a lot of times we don't intend to inflict trauma, especially to our kids.
Oh no.
But it just happens sometimes, and
Totally.
That's now become part of their journey in life.
Yeah, I mean, one could argue potentially, I think it's a little bit of a cautious subject, about like soul contracts, and we choose our parents. And I don't want to say too much about that because I don't want to like justify brutal trauma and
Right.
stuff like that necessarily. But like, that's an interesting one in itself. But also, I really believe like it's never too late.
Yeah.
And like we can always repair, right? And like, how often do we just see people who've just given up? Like, it's too late. The damage is done essentially, right? It's like, no, like,
Yeah.
we can always repair, you know what I mean? And like, if you're willing to do whatever it takes, like, yes, you can't do someone else's work for them, but like you can do quite a bit though,
Yeah.
and you can heal so much stuff still. It's never too late. So I love that, like, you're doing your work,
Yeah.
later, and like, it's great.
Totally.
Yeah.
When I first started working with my spiritual mentor, one of she's a medium of sorts, and one of the things she told me was that in this life I conquered my addiction sooner than I had in any other previous life.
Wow.
And that was like 39, 38, 39, somewhere in there, right?
Yeah.
And so like, and I was like lamenting, like, oh fuck, I was an alcoholic until I was 40, fuck,
Yeah.
blah blah blah, and then just that little bit of just perspective, like, you've conquered this previously, than sooner than your previous lives. It's
Yeah.
like, oh shit, man. Okay, all right,
right.
back on track.
Yeah, I guess so.
And sometimes we just need those little like bursts of confidence, like, hey, bro,
yeah,
you're doing
man.
all right, man. Like you said, never too late.
Yeah.
Like, it's never too late to figure this shit out, man. You could be 80 years old and start that healing journey.
I mean, God, life is so fucking complicated. I mean, and with no roadmap, like we were saying earlier, like what are our expectations here? I mean, my expectation given the setup is like, well, you're fucked until you're not fucked. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
It's kind of like that. You know what I mean? We're so hard on ourselves. I mean, and in some way, I guess that's good. We're trying to like own up to what we've done, and that's a good side of it. You know what I mean? But like beyond that, like, we just beat the shit out of ourselves, and it's a little unfair,
Totally.
Yeah.
And and that, I think the misunderstanding of our emotions tends to lead to those terrible stories we tell ourselves in our heads. Right. And you've spoken about that a bit, just in our conversation and in the book too. But that's one of the things that I think is like, for me, has been the hardest thing to get past, is that narrative.
Yeah.
That, like you said, like, we don't realize there's a voice in our head until we realize it.
Yeah.
And how long has that voice been going on in whatever story that we didn't even realize?
Yeah.
And so like having an awareness of that, just that emotional roadmap.
Yeah, and the mind's really interesting. I mean, this is kind of all my, theories essentially, and people can buy into them or not. But like, like if you're talking about like the chicken or the egg, which comes first, your thoughts or emotions? Like, definitely your emotions, and your thoughts are always a reflection of your emotions, right? And so like, too often we get hung up with the thinking itself because it can be brutal, but we need help essentially for someone to hold an emotional space for us to say, hey, come back to the body. What's really happening for you emotionally, right?
Yeah.
But oftentimes too, just the overall mental dialogue, and this is kind of what I do in my work, is a reflection of what we've been through. So the mental dialogue is a roadmap. And so if you have someone come in and they have like a super harsh inner dialogue, I instantly know like they've been treated harshly.
Right.
Just like that, and it's, it's such a quick diagnosis, but it's so accurate, you know what I mean? And so, oftentimes what's the cure, in the healing journey for a harsh inner dialogue as well? At the root, on the emotional level, what is this person missing? Love and compassion and tenderness, obviously, right? And so like, how can we how can I sit with this person in this like loving, tender way and acknowledge them and what they've been through, right? And I've watched, over time, if people do, the work enough, right, that dialogue will shift on you. You know what I mean? And when it comes to listening to the body, oftentimes I talk to people about like, because our emotions and our mentality is a fluid system, right? So it's always shifting around, and it shifts depending on what's happening around us, right? So like when you're around secure people, healthy people, you may find out that like your inner dialogue actually on the spot gets nicer to you. And it's like, what the fuck is going on, right?
Wow.
And it's like, well, it's actually a body symptom. The body's like, oh, we're in front of someone that like can hold this space or who are tender to us. And like, so we're going to shift with that energy, So it's like this really curious thing when you begin to see all these details of how that system works. But how does that land for you?
I love that
Okay.
because there is this confidence that you feel around certain people, and there's that energy you feel around people that maybe you don't click with.
Yeah.
But you said something that I love, and it's hold the emotional space.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a hard thing for a lot of us to do right now because we're so easily triggered in whatever thing, whether it's political or COVID or what There's so many options to be triggered now, right?
Yeah.
And it's so hard to hold that space for somebody that might be working through their way of trying to figure out if that's the way they actually feel or not.
Yeah.
But then we get so triggered by that we start to attack maybe their perceived ignorance, what we perceive as their ignorance, and then they start to dig into maybe a point they don't even believe in, but they just feel attacked, so they dig into that point, right? And so there's two terms I love from debate, and it's straw manning and steel manning.
Okay.
Straw manning is basically if you and I are have a heated discussion, spirited debate, and I say something and I'm trying to pull my point up and pull my points together, and I fumble and I say some stupid shit, and you capitalize on it, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna pick you apart now.
Yeah.
That's straw manning. Steel manning is similar scenario, but instead of you picking it apart, you try to clarify it as best as possible.
Oh, wow.
It's like the worthy opponent kind of idea, right?
Oh,
I
wow.
want you to have the strongest argument. I want you to have the most clear point that you're making, so then I can retort in kind, right?
Wow.
And so taking the retort in kind and the debate out of it, but can we steel man people that we might be triggered by to help them maybe fully form their first time that they've had the opportunity to form this comment?
Yeah.
Have it come out and then sit there and say, oh my God, I can't believe that's the way I think, right?
Yeah.
So like having that space, holding that emotional space for somebody you might feel triggered by. You might know that this is going to be a conversation that might not go the way that you want it to, but it's still important to have the conversation, right?
Yeah.
To let that person speak, and for you to emotionally, consciously hold that space while you could potentially be triggered, and breathe through it and understand your emotional uprise to let that person have their space, and then you can respond however you want to.
I love it. It's like part of it's like you're talking about consciousness, like being so conscious of like yourself and like how can I stay grounded in this kind of thing, right? It also makes me think about like, as we go through our own healing, we become such stable versions of ourselves. Yeah, I mean, like we're just not triggered in the same ways, right?
Right.
That's a real gift, you know what I mean? Because then you can offer, what do you want? It's stability and kindness to people who are not used to it, right?
Right.
And, sorry, I do believe that most people are very good people. I mean, essentially, right? And like I only think a very small percentage are like bad, but even then I'm like hesitant to even say bad because I don't know if I agree with it. But so if in theory, if you give people enough kindness, right, they will show up well, and they may even reset, and like, but it's, obviously it's so polarized these days. It's like, it's a sad setup essentially,
And, and this rings true for a lot, but, I found that the masses are ignorant, but the individual is smart, and the masses can sway a very intelligent human being very quickly because you get caught up in that energy, right?
Yeah.
The mob mentality.
Yeah.
I worked at nightclubs growing up. I can't tell you how many times I watched like it go from, fun nightclub, dancing, everybody's having a good time. Somebody steps on somebody's shoe, and all of a sudden the entire 500-person dance floor erupts in a fucking brawl. And you're
Wow.
like, what the hell just happened here?
Wow, yeah.
You scuffed the dude's Nikes, and we're throwing glasses now,
Totally.
So, but when we can pull the individuals apart and talk to the individual, and I think, board members are a really good example of this. There was Mendocina, the whole like insecticide company,
Yeah. Yep.
board member that was pulled aside and was talked about, basically interviewed about like their moral compass
Yeah.
because they're putting out all these chemicals that kill people and all this shit. And basically, what the person said was like, no, I believe that we should have clean air, we should have clean water, we shouldn't be dumping all this shit, but I have investors to answer to. So I have to
Yeah.
make these decisions. And that decision is made with the corporation in mind, and corporations are made to make money. And if they're not making money, they're not technically corporate, blah, 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 blah. So basically he's like, oh, I'm just falling in line with what I'm supposed to do. But I actually believe opposite of that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, okay, can we individualize this a little bit more and take it out of that mass mentality? And what would that do to us when we can really sit with our own personal emotions instead of like the group emotions, because it's just like a scapegoat.
Totally. This is why I love people, ultimately who really are doing their own healing work, you know what I mean? Because like, man, once you get on that train, like, different callings kind of wake up within you, right? You really feel like, wow, I want to give back. I want to spread love, essentially. I mean, I think we all kind of hit that conclusion in some form of like, what's the most loving, healing, impactful thing I can do here now that I feel is unique to me, right? It's
Right.
like, once that stuff hits, then like this kind of crap, you kind of step out of that mass, whatever you want to call it, mentality kind of thing. And we truly then can hold space for people in the ways that we need to heal, and
Yeah.
so it's kind of an interesting time, although it's a total shit show, there are so many people doing their work also,
Yeah.
which is like, wow, like, I don't know if there's ever been a time where there's this many people like trying to heal.
I know. Yeah. And the interesting thing with that is even on that journey, like everything's a journey, right? And that's, I love the beauty in that. Like getting to your healing journey is a journey, and then your journey in healing is a journey itself.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, it can be a mind fuck at times.
Yeah, totally.
But I appreciate the enthusiasm of the newly healing person on their journey, and like
Yeah.
everybody should see the
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
right?
totally.
You wake up and do all the stuff. And I heard something the other day that was really kind of fun and landed in a beautiful way. But it was like, you've progressed in your healing journey when you stop talking about your healing journey.
Yeah, that's like,
And it's like, yeah, that's great, because like you finally understand that you're integrating that into yourself, and that
Yep.
everybody's on their own path.
Yep.
And as much as you want to shake people awake and be like, dude, you don't fucking understand. There's so much different. That's not going to do any good, because their ego has to come to that themselves.
And it's an interesting thing about awareness. This is one of my favorite topics. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, right? But you're kind of pointing at it now, right? But like, whether it's like a spiritually designed system that like you cannot bullshit, you know what I mean? But like, you cannot make people who are not ready to see things. It's
Right.
really wild, actually. If you give it credit, right? It's like they're like fucking blind to it. Like it's like, and it's like you have it in your hand, like on a silver platter, and you're like, no. It's like literally right in your face, and like, what do you want for dinner? You know what I mean?
Right.
They have like, they couldn't even fucking see it if they tried to. And it's like, to me, it's like this ingenious system, because I feel like, I mean, this is my interpretation, but it's like, like essentially you can't cheat this system. Like you do your work, and then guess what? You can see all these amazing things, but until you do your work, you don't get access.
Totally.
And so, and then you can kind of get into all this messy stuff about like privilege, and like we get to do the work because we're privileged and all this other stuff, right? But like, but there's something, there's awareness is interesting in that way,
Yeah. And there's, with that, I love the idea of the collective belief, and the more the collective belief is there, the more access we have to that, right?
Yeah.
And, the concepts of, in whatever time ago, we used to have like magic and dragons and all this shit, right?
Yep.
And we've got away from that because the masses don't believe that that's a possibility, even though all of our blockbuster movies and all the TV shows we love are about magic and shit that's not really quote unquote real.
Yeah.
We've just like, that's how we live that part of our beings that we can't identify with anymore.
Yeah.
So like you're saying, more people are doing the work now than has ever done. That collective belief is going to start to grow. And with that growth of the collective belief, maybe things like magic and maybe things like that, like stop rationalizing the fucking reality of the world, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you thought of your mom and then all of a sudden your mom called you, that's magical, right?
Yeah.
You just saw something out of the corner of your eye. No, that's not just the dog that ran by or a shadow. Like that was a being. That might have been your like ancestral homie, right? Just making sure you're doing good, right?
Yep.
Stop rationalizing humanity and just experience the beauty of the magic that it can potentially be.
I mean, I love that shit. It's like, we have not been taught, right, that at our essence, right, we're infinite beings of love and light, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like, but when we say infinite, I mean, it's literal infiniteness in us. That's who we are, right? And so like with that, perspective, like anything is fucking possible, right? And the more that we heal, we tend to like have a little more access as we go to that infinite stuff for ourselves, and then really interesting stuff starts to show up and happen, and we can finally buy into it, hopefully a little bit, because we've done enough work to like trust and
Right.
like whatever. But
Yeah.
we just don't realize how expansive we truly are. We've been shut down too much, or
Yep.
we feel limited in the body. It's not really a limitation here, but like
It's just,
it's,
I think
it's an illusion. But.
yeah, exactly. It's just this weird misunderstanding, and I think, it's funny because we're given these little Easter eggs through life, and
Yeah.
everybody's Easter eggs are different,
Yep.
Mine were, plant medicines and LSD as a young child, not young child, but, 16, 17.
Yeah.
And by no means did I have, let's say, well, now I can see the long lasting effects of what happened in the experiences then. But at that time, it was like, hey, look at the carpet move. Look
Right.
at the wall just melt. It was like just fun party stuff,
Yeah.
But, I think for somebody that had abandoned something that was bigger than him, it was my way of staying subconsciously connected.
Totally.
And I can see that now looking back and be like, man, I was fucking held, and in this
Totally.
weird way, just to keep me safe in that journey as I found my way through life. Not safe in the way of like I didn't fuck up, because I fucked up quite a bit. Went to jail a couple times, did
Yeah.
all that fun shit.
Yeah.
But there's this beauty when you can look back and see the gift of what that was instead of the tragedy that it could potentially be.
Totally. I mean, it's an interesting topic. Like in my opinion, we need a certain dosage of spiritual energy coming in. Otherwise, we kind of lose ourselves. You know what I mean? It's like that's what I think of when you tell a story like that. Like, we can't really hang on, and try to come back online and try to be conscious without some access somewhere. And so hopefully, many of us have had really, fortunate opportunities here and there, even if it's as basic as like an LSD or whatever, that stuff does connect us to universal love. And so like that's a dose, it can help us. I've had like just fortunate moments when I was really like, I'm not going to make it, and like things show up to like keep me going. And like, it's like, even though I was talking to my spirit guys, I'm like, guys, those are like close calls. I don't know. Like you can't die anyways. You're infinite. Who cares? Right? It's like,
right.
It's like, but it's like, no, I was like, no, seriously, guys, I was gonna like really off myself. They're like, nah, like we thought you'd make it through there, whatever.
Oh,
so it's like,
God,
that's
such a it's such an interesting like conversation to have now, after the fact.
Yeah,
man. But it's when you can feel that though, there's it's not like a confidence. It's just. It's almost like you feel the hug, you feel the love, you feel the intention as to why you're put into that position.
Totally.
Totally.
I can tell you a cool story. Actually, I'm trying to think of a few different ones I want to choose from, but there was this. So when I came to Seattle, I joined that book group. Right? I can't remember the name of it. Meeting in the Present Moment. Like fuck, whatever. I used to know it. It's been a long time. But anyways, the guy who ran it, Warren, was this amazing man, and like it was one of those moments when I walked in, I felt like almost this kind of like. Oh, like that moment. And I needed someone like that. I was really fucked up, you know what I mean? And so I felt like, oh my God, I found like this teacher, and he was so vulnerable, and he just like opened the group up by saying like, I just wanted to create this group to like, so we just can be vulnerable together and grow. And he would share his struggles, and he was an alcoholic for a long time. And I was like, I've never seen really any human be this vulnerable before. I was still like young, 21, but I've never seen a man do it before, ever. So it just blew my mind apart. But it also like began to open things up for me. You know what I mean? But then 3 months into the group, he died of a heart attack.
Oh shit!
At the gym, right? Okay. And it was like just the beginning of like this amazing thing happening, and I was so upset about it. Obviously, right? And but I took over the group because I didn't want the group to fall apart, and I ended up being the one running it, right? But the reason I tell you that backstory is like a couple of years later. I dealt with depression for so long, and so I was in another phase, going through Bastille, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Literally I might off myself, which I should have censor warning. I don't know, but sorry. But he actually came to me in a dream, and I was in this dream, I was asleep, and it was this bright white space. It was just whiteness everywhere. It felt like a very loving space, and he showed up. I recognized him immediately. And he just came up to me in this like loving way and held me so tight. And I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried all night long. And when I woke up the next day, I felt like I had cried all night, but I felt better. I felt like he had come to like make sure I was okay.
Yeah.
And I just knew immediately. I was like, wow, like not only is this a gift because he really helped me out, but it's proof. It's proof that like, the spiritual world that I'm at the time craving to have more experiences with, and I didn't know how to have that yet. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but he's showing up to like give me like extra, stuff that I needed.
Yeah. Are you a vivid dreamer? Is that something?
No, that's the
Okay.
crazy thing. It
All
just
right.
and then like a year later, it happened again.
Okay.
So he came twice, but only when I really needed it have I had that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a big dreamer.
Yeah.
I used to think it was because I drank too much, and I quit drinking. I still don't dream, but within the past year, I've started to dream again.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because I've even like when I was a kid, I don't remember dreaming. And so this whole idea of dreaming to me is brand new.
Yeah.
And even like imagination, like I could always think of things, but I wouldn't picture them.
Yeah.
And that's starting to start to manifest
cool.
too. The more I start to get into my body and the trust ideas.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. The heightening of senses that start to happen from this.
Totally.
But dreaming for me was one of those that like. It's like, holy shit! I'm entertained when I'm sleeping now.
Yeah,
like, I
well,
wake
that's
up and I'm like,
awesome, man.
dude, I can't remember shit, but I know
Yeah.
I had fun doing it.
No, man, it's awesome. I mean, the interesting thing about dreaming, again, like I'm not typically a night dreamer, but and essentially Sharp breaks up dreaming into three categories: daydreams, life dreams, and night dreams, right?
Okay.
And so, oftentimes if you can have these interactions while you're awake, whether you're interacting with spirit or like, your higher self or different things, oftentimes you don't even need to have the night dreams, right? And people get very hung up on night dreams. They're like, I don't dream enough. Like like, what's wrong with me? It's like, well, let's just learn about you first and see how do you operate, right? Like, because also for me, not only do I interact a lot on the daily, like in my waking time, but I'm also very interactive with my life dreams, right? And so like I feel like the nighttime dreaming, I don't necessarily need it per se, and so, but I see people really, harsh on themselves often.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a dreamer, like at night specifically, like what's wrong with me? And I'm like, like let's be cautious if we're gonna label it like as if it's a problem, what I mean?
I love that. That's beautiful. And actually, it reminds me, there was a post you made not too long ago about basically talking about how we talk to ourselves and how we label ourselves.
Yeah.
And, I said introvert earlier. I'm an introvert.
Yep.
It's so funny. Like we put ourselves in these boxes so much, and they are so limiting with the verbiage that we use about ourselves and the ideas that we have about ourselves that like there's so much subconscious shit that we give ourselves that we might not even realize. Like one of my daughters is 14. She does like 4 sports. She's got straight A's. She does like, she's just a good fucking kid, right? She's doing like, well, quote unquote, she's doing a lot of good shit in life, right?
Yeah.
And, but I talk to her and she'll be like, I'm like, how was your day? She's like, I was lazy today. I was lazy. I'm like, wait a minute. Let's look at that word lazy. Like, what does that mean? She's like, well, I didn't do anything. Like, that's good. You're recovering. You're repairing, right? You do 4 sports a day, gymnastics and soccer and all this shit. And you go to school and you help babysit the kids and do all this shit. Not lazy. Take that word out of it because that's a negative sounding word.
Yeah.
And then that can give you a way to feel about it, right?
Yeah.
But if you put that in there as like, I'm recovering, I'm resting, I'm taking care of myself.
Yeah.
I don't be 40 years old and fix your verbiage. Like, understand it now and start to get in front of that shit.
It's funny, right? Because like on one end, like culturally, there's all this progression with like fluidity. We're talking about more like gender and sexuality and all that kind of stuff, right? And yet, when it comes to like character traits or the way that we label ourselves, beyond those categories, they're so black and white still. Like when are we gonna like truly see that like everything is fluid? It's not just like key topics, right? It's like no, it's like we're always shifting in how we feel, and what's going on is always shifting. So like, why are we always trying to hold on to one label or the other? It's like, it makes no sense. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It's like, embrace the wave that you're in,
Yeah. And I think about like, extroverts and introverts are interesting. I think people are finally kind of getting away from that shit. You know what I mean? But like, that's a great topic because it's like, and I'm sure you've noticed this when you're around key people, you might become very extroverted. You're like, I just want to talk my ass off with this person. This person's
Totally.
the shit, you know? And you get excited and you get big and you're like, what the fuck? I thought I was an introvert. You know what I mean? It's like, well, no, it's all like the energy that you're dealing with. You know what I mean? It just
Right.
and it impacts you differently, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's lovely because we go to so many different places and we interact with so many different humans that you do get charged, and to notice what type of people charge you up and what type of people like
Exactly.
maybe drain your energy.
Exactly.
And it's no right, wrong, or indifferent, but like that's a good compass of what it's like. Dogs that sniff each other's butts, right?
Yeah.
There's communication there. There's information that's exchanged. There's actually a research that's been done. So they accidentally stumbled upon this about a decade ago. I can't remember the research team that was doing it, or what they were originally trying to research. I think it was like interactions with negative news, right?
Okay.
So the idea is that you have a moderator sitting behind a desk. Human being comes in, sits across from them, and they deliver some type of news and then gauge their response.
Right.
But part of the introductory process was they would walk in, shake hands. Hi, my name's Adam. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. But as soon as they shook the hands, the person was like, okay, give me just a second. I'm going to be right back. And they would leave. And they were videotaping this. And what they found was over 50%, I was like 52% of people, after they shook hands, sniffed their hand.
Oh.
And most of the people didn't realize they did it, right?
Whoa.
And they were like almost kind of like put off when they saw the video of them sniffing their own hand and be like, what the
Whoa.
fuck am I doing that for?
Interesting.
And so they started to be like, okay, well, what's going on here? Let's follow this down.
Yeah.
And what they're understanding is like, we used to be able to communicate a lot of understanding of how we are as people through the way we smell.
Oh.
The pheromones, the musk we put off and all this stuff, right? And so that was what their hypothesis is that's one of those deep-seated, traits that we've just kind of maybe moved away from, but it's still very prominent in a large part of the population, where we can smell the pheromones and the anxiousness or the calmness in somebody. And it's like shit like that. It's like, man, let's train that shit, man. Like, God.
I love this topic. I don't know if you saw my Instagram recently, but like I posted a video about how we can use our smell on an intuitive level. It's like,
I think I did.
It's perfect. It's like, and this is like one of my favorite things because, again, it's about trusting the body, and the body is super intelligent, right? And so like when I love this as it applies to dating, because it's like, so you go on a first date, right?
Yeah.
And if you just went on that date with a blindfold on and you smell their perfume or cologne and then made a choice on the spot, that choice would be highly accurate, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Because that smell, in my opinion, carries lots of information that smell represents them. It's not just some random choice,
Yeah.
And that smell hits your system, and what happens? You either feel calmed down by it, you feel like it's like your home in some way, or you feel like anxious, or you feel like I don't like this smell, right? And like we just tend to rationalize this stuff away as if like, oh, I need to give someone a chance, which is, it's great. You can give people chances, of course,
Right,
but
yeah.
but if you give it more credit, you should at least have it on your radar to be like, this smell is bugging me. This is probably not going to work. I can learn more about them, right? But like,
Yeah.
and so, my practice, when people come in, when clients come in, when that smell hits me, whether it's a perfume or a cologne or whatever, I just use it as straight information, right? Like I think about like, what does the smell remind me of? And I think of past people I knew. What do I know about those past people? I bet it's the same for this person, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or B, like sometimes you can smell like the anxiety on people, or like what you're saying, and so like, but we just don't trust that stuff, but like it's so natural to us.
Yeah.
It
really is. And I mean, we kind of talked about a lot of these things throughout the conversation today, but I have a silent crusade, and when I shared this with you, you were super passionate about like I think you probably have this understanding too, but why can't we teach this stuff to our kids when they're young? Why can't this be part of natural curriculum and when you're growing up through like kindergarten, whatever it is, but why we're still focusing on all this like linear knowledge to teach kids, but we have no idea how to use the body that we're born with.
Totally.
So like things that we've talked about, like talking about your emotions, how to utilize your body, how to utilize your breath, the voices that you fucking hear in your head that eventually pop up and that maybe think you're crazy, Like, I would love to get to a point to where this just becomes common core, just information.
Totally. I mean, ideally, as we heal ourselves and we can bring like love and emotional consciousness to our kids, right? Like that's a dramatic help.
Right.
But we're still missing key things that like a lot of indigenous cultures knew better about, right? Which is like we still need initiations as an example. We need,
Right.
acts of courage and ways to like really go inward, but we also need this like deep connection to the earth and nature, 'cause that's really built in us as a
Right.
thing we need to have a relationship with, and so if we can just find those like whatever it is key 5 things that we have to understand, then yeah, we can give our kids like a good chance. It's been
Yeah.
interesting for me, like going through Shar stuff again, because I'm just like naturally a super spiritual person. I guess everyone is. It's kind of silly, but like I have this spiritual craving in me, right? And so in Shar's community, that's totally normal, right? So it's like, great, I'm home. This is easy, right?
Yeah.
But then it opens up interesting things. So as an example, my daughter, she at the time she was like 6 or 5, and she didn't want to sleep in her bed, and she sleeps with her brother, but even with him there, she didn't want to sleep. She's like, Dad, there's this monster in my closet. Essentially, classic, right? And,
Right.
I'm trying to be good about it. It's like, go to the closet, and we just try to make her feel comfortable, and go to bed, whatever. But it keeps happening, right? She goes, no, there's seriously something there. So I go to one of my mentors, Charlene, and I'm like, this is what's happening to my daughter. Not thinking much of it, and Charlene's like, well, get that spirit out of your fucking house. What are you doing? And I was like, oh shit, like I didn't even think about that. You know what I mean? Like she gave my daughter like full credit. It was like, she's seeing something. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I was like, fuck, like, I don't know how to get this fucking spirit out of my house. And she's like, yes, you do. Just go figure it out. So like, I went home. I was like, fuck, and I had enough training at the time to like do enough to do like a ceremony essentially. But what was cool about it is I brought my daughter in with me.
Fuck yeah.
And I said, we're doing this ceremony. We need to talk to the spirit in the closet that you saw. I'm sorry about that. I was not online. I'm online now, right? It's like, and we sat down, and it turned out that there was this being who got blown in from a storm into our dimension, and he didn't want to be there, but it was like this being with like this horn, but as we talked to him, and my daughter was talking to him, he didn't come across as scary. He was just like, I just want to go home. I didn't mean to scare you. And so I was talking to my daughter about it. I'm like, what should we do? And my daughter's like, well, he doesn't want to leave during the day. Like, he has to be at night. I'm like, okay, we can do that. We'll do it at night. And then she was the one who did the ceremony straight up, and it fucking worked. And then from that point on, she never came out of her room to say there's any problems.
Wow.
It just blew my mind apart. You know what I mean?
Wow.
But like, I think of stuff like that. I'm like, God, like, kids are so good at this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not good at this, but she was a natural from the beginning. You know what I mean?
Wow.
I'm like, we just need to listen more. Essentially, kids are already in it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's us. We're the problem.
Exactly. There's so many stories that, people rationalizing, imaginary friends or things like that. I just saw grandpa. Oh, well, grandpa's been dead for 2 years. That's sweet.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've been in this house about 18 months, almost 2 years. And I've always felt some kind of presence here. It's never anything. I didn't feel harmed or anything, but I always felt something around us. Catch shadows here and there, stuff like that. But it always felt good. I don't feel anything bad. So I welcome it. And I'm like, hey, as long as we're all good, just let me know if I'm treading on you, and you let me know, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, we had a family in town, and they have 2 little boys, 2 and 4. And the very first night that they were here, the 4-year-old was like, "There's a man in a mustache over there."
Oh shit.
And we're like, "Sweet. What does he look like?" He's like, "Oh, he's tall. He's got a hat and a big mustache." I'm like, "Awesome. Does he seem nice?" She's like, "Yeah, he seems really nice." I'm like, "Sweet." So it's like, can we encourage our kids to step into that magic, like we were talking about earlier? Like, embrace that. Let's encourage that shit. Not to a point of like we're aggrandizing, like fantasy or something like that, but like, the veil is very thin for kids, especially if you believe in the reincarnation idea, right? And like ages 7 to 9, there's books, there's research done about all this shit, about kids remembering stuff from their past lives. Like, let's encourage that and see where that information takes those kids, instead of like dismissing their reality, and then that in turn kind of turns them against themselves, because they don't trust themselves, because my parental figure that I trust and tells me everything's good or bad is telling me that this is bad, so I should just stop listening to my body. And then we start the downhill spiral of, well, I don't trust anything about me anymore, right?
Ding ding ding.
Fuck,
hit it on the nose, man. Shit. Yeah, I mean, it also makes you think about, like, ideally we need to be taught like universal spiritual principles, and like, and I didn't know that shit either. I just thought of like, oh, well, it's like, we're beings of love and light. What more do I need to know? Like, love and light's the answer. Move on, right?
Right.
But again, I keep talking about sharks. I'm just in it right now. But like, Shar is great because she just gives so much structure, right? It's like one of the things she does, for example, is like she's very big on boundaries. And so one of the spiritual boundaries are we only interact with spirits who are good, true, and beautiful.
Yeah.
Spirits are here for our highest good, right? And so like you don't fuck with the rest of them, right? But you have to tell people that, like, you know, too often I see energy healers who don't do that, and I'm like, dude, what are you fucking doing? Like, do not interact with that thing. You know, it's like that's not good for you or anyone. You know what I mean? But like they don't know. You know what I mean? It's like so like how do we bring in universal principles to it's like the same you would teach your kids for human to human relationships. You need to have boundaries. You need to like respect people and yourself. I mean, like it's the same shit.
Yeah.
You know, but we're just so spiritually disconnected. We just don't know yet, you know.
Totally. It's funny. You keep mentioning Shar, and my mentor is trained by Shar.
Yeah.
One of the things that Holly told me that was very, very strict, because she basically told me what you just said. Like, I been doing energy work, and I guess had been ignorant to the fact that there is. I don't even want to call it negative or dark, but there's energy out there that's maybe not aligned with what I'm aligned with, right? And it's not bad or anything. They're on their own mission. I'm on my own mission, right?
Yeah.
But the understanding that that's there, right? And so we had that talk, and she calls it the spiritual smackdown. She just like said, no, right?
Yeah.
And then she was like, and then on top of that, don't ever touch a Ouija board.
Yeah.
Tell it to get fucked. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know it was like that. Like I get the Ouija board idea, but she's like, no. You'll mess around. You'll get something here you don't know, you don't want. It's going to get stuck to you. Don't ever do it. And I'm like, whoa, all right. Good to know.
Great. I love the smackdown. Those are,
man. It's like we got to get put back in our place sometimes.
Yeah, we want mentors who are strong and call us out, man. Like I call my mentors like my insurance policy because I have my ego that I'm still dealing with. I feel like my ego is pretty big still. I'm still trying to rein it in, you know, and like. Yep. So I go to them and like Charlene just calls me out like really heavy. I'm like, God, man, I'm like really beat up here. You know what I mean? But it's good. I'm like, okay, I'm a better version of myself now. And like
I'm going to cry in the car, but I feel better right now.
I might hate you for a week now. You know what I mean? Or like Char's brother just came into town and like we just did a sweat lodge with him on Monday night. Okay. Beat the shit out of me. It was so hard. You know what I mean? But like I came out of that. I'm like, oh man, I should be doing this. Like, he comes once a year. But like, I gotta just keep doing stuff like this, you know, to like just stay a high integrity version of myself.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Yep. And I'm right there with you. I try to get on a regular like regime of macrodosing, combo, just the medicines that I know that work for me, either to do work, right? Move those big boulders. Sometimes I need a little spiritual crowbar, I like to call it, so I'll macrodose with some psilocybin. But, when I have big movements in life, when I feel like I've like, okay, I think I've processed something, not that I've like checked the box, like put the ED at the end of the word healed, right?
Totally.
We're still ING in that shit.
Yeah, right.
But it's that movement will happen. Then I'll sit with combo and kind of flush all the rest of that shit out, like the residuals of whatever stickiness might be in there.
Yeah. Is that the frog poison you're talking about? Yeah. I haven't done that yet, but I've heard very powerful things.
It's interesting. It's very interesting. The first time I did it, I knew what to expect to an extent. There's always curveballs.
Yeah.
And I sat with the medicine, very trusted human being I sat with named Ben. He was awesome. And so he gives me the medicine, he gives me the bucket, and I'm basically sitting there like ready to purge, drink 2 liters of water. Like I can feel like the water's up to my esophagus. There's just so much water in my body right now.
Yep.
And he hands me the bucket, and I'm sitting there and I'm like dry heaving a couple times, then it starts coming out. But I dry heave for like, it seemed like almost a minute.
Yeah.
Threw up for almost 20 minutes. And I was exhausted as shit, and I had to go take a break and like use the bathroom, wipe my face up. And I walk in the bathroom, and I just happened to glance in the mirror, and my whole face was swollen.
Oh my
Because
God.
what happened was when I was dry heaving, all the fluid was going into my face, and they call it frog face because like my lips bulged out, my cheeks, I literally looked like a frog, and
Whoa.
I'm like, I don't know if I'm hallucinating or if this is the way it's supposed to work. And I got back, and Ben's like, you saw your face, huh? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, it's okay. It'll go down. And like the next day, it was fine. But
okay.
It's like, holy shit, man.
I imagine that's an intense thing to, you're like, oh my God, am I going to die or something?
It's like, am I just going to have this face now? I'm going to be Kermit the Frog standing
Yeah, exactly.
now.
It's like, oh my God. That's wild. I've done ayahuasca, and that community does the frog poison at times, but I just haven't had the opportunity. I've heard interesting things.
Yeah, it's it's interesting to find the medicines that work for you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Another thing I appreciate about Shar, apparently Char's just here tonight with us. But it's like she's kind of really against the plant medicines. She's like, you don't need them. Like, that's part of her lineage, of course, too. But it's been interesting to like step away from. For me, it's like specific like ayahuasca, and just to be like, you can do it without it, essentially,
Yep.
And like I think I'll be doing a vision quest, and it's like at the end of the month, and like I think that's a good version of like potentially an equivalent or maybe I don't know, more than equivalent. I have no reference really for a vision quest yet, but
Right.
like I like that also as like an option to just be like, no, there's other ways that you don't always have to just do the plant stuff.
Exactly. You don't have to blast off.
No, you don't have
with
to.
an
You can do
external
it.
medicine.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And that's a great message to know that you can always do the work yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can definitely do that work. It might not even take longer or be harder, whatever whatever you want to put on it. But it's just your choice to do that type of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So with you, with the book that you've written, the practice that you have, the concepts that you're working around, are you wanting to write more? Are you wanting to maybe podcast again? I mean, what's your next steps in life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really at this. I was saying earlier, I'm really at this transition point now. It's like I really want to step into like a teacher leader role. I've been in private practice for 12 plus years now, and it's it's one-on-one, which I love the intimacy of it. But like I really would love to do group healings essentially. I mean, so I'm not quite sure what that will end up looking like. I'm going to do Vision Quest, and that's probably my biggest prayer is to get clarity on that, and to help me create something. I've been sitting with the idea of creating a spiritual school, like I said earlier.
Yeah.
It's a little intimidating, but like I feel like I could do it, and what I love about going through Shard's first year is that, like I said, it's like we meet once a week. We talk about spiritual stuff. It's like it's awesome. I love the in-person community aspect of it. And actually she had Zoom in also, and so I don't know. I think, and the book, might be a platform for me to just do other awesome things like I'm doing here with you, and like see where that could take me. I would love to just speak also and give talks and walk people through the tools, but I realized at the end of writing this book, I do feel like this book is a complete book. I don't think I needed to add anything to it, but like I realized, oh shit, like it's not really a how to heal in my book. It's just pure awareness building, and like I do believe awareness building is the first step to healing anyway. So it's like that had to happen first in that book. But I do need to write another book of like, okay, how do you apply the tools now that you have the tools, essentially? So
hell yeah,
we'll see if that happens. So
definitely that could be the impetus for that spiritual school.
Yeah,
right? It's like here's the awareness that we're going to build, and now we're going to activate it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I would love to see that spiritual school manifest.
Thank
because
you.
like I think that like we said earlier, there's no physical blueprint that you can take from human to human, but the more we talk about it, the more we share, the more we understand that your journey is yours to figure out.
Totally.
And there's a beauty after you get over the fear of that. There's a beauty in all of that.
Yeah, and I remember hearing this thing. You ever heard of this author Adyashanti? He was like a big Zen guy back.
So.
Yeah, he wrote a few books, but he's interesting because he in some way he's like he goes against some aspects of Zen tradition, and like he talks about like we're trying to like follow the Buddha's path to enlightenment, by doing his path. But like, what about this idea that we all have a unique path, and so we're trying to meditate, we're trying to do all the things he's done, and like we're so frustrated it doesn't work, but like you might be designed to go ride big fucking waves, and then you'd be in it, and that's it. That's like that's your version, and like I just feel like we're not having enough conversation about like, yes, the path to being the fullest realized version of ourselves is so unique to us, right? So we don't need a template for what that path is necessarily. We just need enough people around us to hold space, to be like, keep going, and like here are some tools, and like but discover for yourself. And I think too often, especially with like meditation, like these kind of more kind of popularized things that people are doing, like meditation's great, I have no problem with meditation, but too often people come to my office and they're frustrated. They're like, I don't feel calmer, I feel fucked up, and like, yes, I go to someone like, well, keep going, it'll get easier, and like, I've been doing it for 3 years, it's not getting easier. And I'm like, well, you're doing it wrong. Like, this is not, you shouldn't be meditating. What do you actually, like, what actually calms you down? You know what I mean? And like, oh, calming down, I just want to walk my dog. I'm like, well, fucking do that and go talk to your higher self there. And that works, It's like, but we are taught like we're going to miss something that everyone else is getting that we're not getting. It's like it's this competitive shit that like, or comparison shit that I just really gets in our way.
Totally. That's when the very first Vipassana that I did. I knew it was a silent meditation retreat, all that stuff, but I didn't really understand the full reason why the silence was there.
Yeah.
Or the layers of. And one of the layers of the silent side is that so you can have your own experience and not feel like you're not doing it right.
Oh.
Because let's say after day 4, all of a sudden I reach some kind of state of mind, right? And see some shit or experience some shit, right? But the person next to me is having a different experience. Maybe they didn't get what I would consider as deep as me or whatever it is. And if we could talk about that afterwards, I'd be like, oh my God, I fucking saw my version of God and I did all this stuff and I wrote on a fucking rainbow and all this shit happened. It was great. And then the guy next to me is like, well, none of that happened to me. Oh shit, now I'm doing it wrong. And then we create the story in our head about oh, now I can't even fucking meditate right?
Wow.
So allowing the experiences to happen. And then after all of that is done, once you kind of work through your demons, then we start talking again and you do share experiences, but it's more of there's more of an understanding as that's your experience, this is my experience, and they all needed to happen the way they happened.
I did not know that about the silent stuff. That makes total sense. That's awesome. I love that.
It was interesting. When they finally told me that, I'm like, you could have led with that.
Yeah, that would have really helped me.
Day 1, you don't have to wait till day fucking 10 to
I
tell
thought
me
you were
that
just trying to
shit.
punish me. I didn't know. It's whatever. It's
well, dude, thank you so much, man.
Man.
I've had such a good time talking with you.
Yeah.
And I would love to have you back in the future. Just continue to check in on what you're working on.
I would love that.
Hopefully you got the spiritual school working.
I'll let you know if it happens.
But thank you. Thanks for writing the book. Thanks for your practice. Thanks for just being an awesome human and doing what you do, brother.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending time with Ben and I. Check out the show notes for ways to get in touch with Ben, to schedule an appointment with him, or to order his book, The Highly Intelligent Body. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Obeisance and love. We'll see you next time.